like that. And in anticipation of that, Joshua sends out 2 spies to go to Jericho and find out what they can find out about that place. They are received there by a harlot woman named Rahab. And she hides them on the roof of her house under some stacks of flax that she had stored there. And when word got out that these spies had come, and they came to Rahab's house looking for them, and she said, well, they're gone. I didn't know who they were, but they came and they're gone. Maybe if you hurry up, you can catch up with them. And after the city people had left, she brought the men down and made a deal with them that she and her family would be spared when the city was taken. And there was a sign to be left in the window, a scarlet cord to be held out the window. Her house was on the wall of the city, on the top of the wall of the city. She was to hang the scarlet cord out, and that would be the sign. Anybody in the house, any of her family in the house, would be spared when the city was taken. Now, last week I sort of gave you a challenge to be prepared to explain Rahab the harlot. Rahab the harlot. And she is held out as a hero of faith. Let's look at our New Testaments for just a minute. In Hebrews chapter 11, well, Hebrews 11, that's the chapter we call Faith's Hall of Fame. Great characters of faith are all recorded there in Hebrews chapter 11. And in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 31, Rahab is mentioned in that listing of faithful people. By faith, the walls of Jericho came down, verse 30, after they were compassed about 7 days. By faith, the harlot Rahab perished not with them that believed not, when she had received the spies with peace. Well, she received the spies with peace, but she protected them by lying about it, right? That's not the only place she's mentioned. Look in James chapter 2. In James chapter 2, we might begin at verse 23. The scripture was fulfilled, which saith, Abraham believed God, and it was imputed to him for righteousness, and he was called the friend of God. You see then how that by works a man is justified, and not by faith only. Likewise also was not Rahab the harlot justified by works when she had received the messengers and had sent them out another way. For as the body without the spirit is dead, so faith without works is dead also. So 2 separate times in the New Testament, Rahab is mentioned. All right, now my question to you is, how can this woman be justified? She's a person of bad reputation to start with. And secondly, she lied to protect the spies, and yet she is commended here. What I think there's some challenging explanations due in this situation. Where do you want to start with that? Anybody? I'm not seeing any hands. Wade?
Well, I don't think she's commended for lying.
Okay.
But there are some things that she was commended for. That she believed that the city would be overtaken and that God would prevail. And so I think that's what she's being commended for.
Yeah, I look at in our text in the book of Judges. In Judges, Judges, Joshua. What am I doing here? In Joshua chapter 2, she strongly states her faith in the God of Israel. Look in Joshua 2, beginning at verse 9. She said to the men, that is to these spies, I know that the Lord hath given you the land, and that your terror has fallen upon us, and all that the inhabitants of the land faint because of you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites that were on the other side of Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom ye utterly destroyed. And as soon as we had heard these things, our hearts did melt, neither did there remain any more courage in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, he is God in heaven above and in earth beneath. Now, therefore, I pray you, swear to me by the Lord, since I have shown you kindness, that you will also show kindness unto my father's house and give me a true token. And then on it goes. So I believe that Wade's answer is the right one, that it doesn't say, she did a good thing. She told a lie that saved some men's lives. Her lying is not commended. Her faith is commended. And she expresses her faith here in the passage that we just read. And so the commendation is for her faith, not for the way that she did everything. Her harlotry is not commended. Her lying is not commended. But the fact that she could take all of the evidence and conclude that God is the true God, that's what she commended for. Now, the other people of the city were afraid, but they didn't have the same faith that Rahab manifested. And so I think the answer to that question, although I think it's a challenging question, the answer to that question is she's commended for her faith. There's no single character in the Bible, with the exception of Jesus, that could be commended for perfection. In Hebrews 11, where she's mentioned, all those people of faith, they all had their flaws, and we know a lot about their flaws. But their faith is commended. This woman had flaws, but her faith is commended. Wayne, I saw your hand.
Not really, but with Rahab.
Well, don't rub your nose or anything. It's like an auction. It's like an auction around here.
Like you said, her faith is what she's commended for. She's not commended for the things that she did that maybe were sinful, that was in exercise of that faith, like lying and saying they went out another way. But she is commended for she sent them out another way. But there's no mention of her lying about it.
Yeah.
And so the lying...
She took the pieces of evidence and truly concluded, your God is the God of heaven. Yeah.
So if you compare it to the children of Israel, who had all of the benefits of the knowledge of a relationship with God, on the way out of Egypt, they came to Kadesh Barnea, and they did not have faith in God to go in and conquer the land. But in comparison, this one heathen who can hear the evidence, as you say, from afar, by word of mouth, not by sight, like the Israelites had. And she has enough faith to do what she thought was right, to protect these men that were of the true God that she now believed. That is so much greater faith than these Israelites had all the benefits. And so she is held up, and we see her in the lineage of Christ, that even that's how much she's thought of. It's not her action. How would she have known any better previously to this, even becoming a part of the Israelite family as she does later on? She wouldn't know any better. Right. But it's what she did with the knowledge that she had.
Good. Well said, I think. Tom?
Other thing is, she's mentioning events that took place 40 years prior to this. She probably wasn't alive when that done.
Maybe not. I hadn't thought about that.
Because she's mentioned in the lineage of Jesus there also. So here, she's evidently born after this event. She'd heard these events.
The crossing of the Red Sea, like you say, she likely was not even alive when that happened.
And here you had, like James mentioned, the children of Israel walked through the sea, and they still didn't believe everything and didn't have that kind of faith that she had. She heard about it.
Yeah.
Had to be secondhand. It wasn't firsthand that she was aware of it.
Yeah.
Probably the position she was in, there's people coming and going out of the city, and she's hearing these type things as growing up, or her parents are talking about it, different things. So here's a person that wasn't there, wasn't alive, heard the events, believed the events, and reacted to it.
Okay. And so she acted in faith. So her lying is not commended. Her harlotry is not commended. Nothing about her sinful life is commended. Her faith is commended. And that's the key. I think that's the key to the answer. But again, I would stress to you, you would not be able to hold any Bible individual up as an example if sins kept them from serving as an example. Because every Bible character sinned with the exception of Jesus. So what about Abraham? Abraham, great man of faith. Yeah, but we know his flaws. David, great man of faith, but we know his flaws. Peter, great man of faith, but we know his flaws. Rahab the harlot, a person of faith. We know her flaws, but she had faith, and that's what she's commended for. And you have to believe that and very little else is said other than that she is mentioned in the genealogy of Jesus himself. But you have to believe that her life changed after this, that her life was changed after this episode in order for her to be in the lineage of Jesus Christ. And so, again, I think that's got to be the answer. Wait.
No, I was just going to say, Tom kind of placed emphasis on she may not even have been born, she didn't see it. Aren't we in the same spot?
Yeah.
Because we weren't born then, we're just going by what we're reading.
Yeah.
And so our faith is dependent upon that as well.
Good. Okay. All right. Good. I think those are the right answers, guys. I think that's the way we got to go with that. All right. So the children of Israel are on, if you picture this in your mind's eye, sort of picture the map. Here's the promised land. Here's the Jordan River. They're over here. They're on the east side of the Jordan River, just across from Jericho, but they are still over here on the east side of the Jordan River, and they got to get across. How are they going to cross? Well, we'll get into chapter 3, look at verse 13. Now, again, this is a survey, so we're not reading everything. We're hitting the highlights. Chapter 3, Joshua chapter 3, verse 13. It shall come to pass, as soon as the soles of the feet of the priests that bear the ark of the Lord of all the earth, shall rest in the waters of Jordan, that the waters of Jordan shall be cut off from the waters that come down from above, and they shall stand upon a heap. And it shall come to pass, when the people remove from their tents, to pass over the Jordan, and the priests bearing the ark of the covenant before the people. And as they that bear the ark were coming to the Jordan, and the feet of the priests that bear the ark were dipped in the brim of the water, for the Jordan overfloweth all his banks all the time of harvest, that the waters which came down from above stood and rose up upon a heap very far from the city Adam, which is beside Zaratan. And those that came down toward the sea of the plain, even the salt sea, failed and were cut off, and the people passed right over against Jericho. So, we talk about the Red Sea crossing, and that's the much more better known episode. But here's another episode where the water was stopped or split or divided. In this case, this is a flowing river, not a calm sea. And so when the priests stepped into the water of the Jordan bearing the Ark of the Covenant, upstream, the waters were held back miraculously, and they were able to cross over. Now, one of the things that they were instructed to do in chapter 4, verse 3, command ye them, saying, take you hence out of the midst of the Jordan, out of the place where the priest's feet stood firm, 12 stones, and ye shall carry them over with you, and leave them in a lodging place when ye lodge this night. So from the riverbed of the Jordan River, they took up 12 stones. And then, as you skip down to verse 19, chapter 4, verse 19, the people came up out of the Jordan on the 10th day of the first month and encamped in Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. And those 12 stones which they took out of the Jordan did Joshua pitch in Gilgal. And he spake unto the children of Israel, saying, when your children shall ask their fathers in the time to come, saying, what mean these stones? Then ye shall let your children know, saying, Israel came over this Jordan on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of Jordan from before you, until ye were passed over, as the Lord your God did to the Red Sea, which he dried up from before us until we were gone over, that all the people of the earth might know that the hand of the Lord, that it is mighty, that ye might fear the Lord your God forever. And so they set up a monument, a pillar of stones, as a memorial to this deliverance, this passage of crossing the Jordan River. From what we read there, this was the time when the Jordan River would typically be in flood stage. And so, it wasn't just, a shallow creek that you might just wade across without any trouble. This was probably a significantly flooded river. And, someone might pass through even a flooded river, if you, I don't know if camels swim or not, but you get on a camel, hang on to your camel and he might get you across. But this was a huge traveling band of people. And to get them over, this is the way God delivered them. And so he set up these stones so that in future time, when your children ask, what do these stones mean? You'll be able to explain to them how God delivered you across the Jordan River on dry land. God is a God of memorials. There's a lot of that in the Old Testament. Time and again, different things were done to help them remember. Different feasts and so forth were instigated to help them remember. God is a God who values his people remembering. And for us, every Sunday as we take the Lord's Supper, it's a memorial. It's a God-ordained memorial. God does not want us to forget either. There's a strong emphasis on the part of God toward remembering his blessings. Thoughts or comments, Sarah?
Verse 9, it seems to be saying that not only did they take stones from the middle of Jordan out and build a memorial, they also built a memorial in the river as they were crossing.
Okay, chapter 5, or chapter 4? 4:9, okay. Joshua set up 12 stones in the midst of Jordan, in the place where the feet of the priests which bear the Ark of the Covenant stood, and they are there unto this day, okay. So there's...
Never apparently knew,
Yeah.
how rivers change as years go by and all that.
Yeah.
So
Kind of interesting, yeah. I don't know. As you say, who would ever see it? Maybe in low water times it might be evident. I don't know. That is unusual. Wayne?
Yeah, this is an important event in the life of Joshua, because in verse 14, on this day the Lord exalted Joshua in the sight of all Israel, so that they will revere him just as they did Moses. So he picked something, this is just my opinion, he picked something that would remind them of something Moses did. And
I don't know about this Joshua guy. He's okay, but man, Moses took us across the Red Sea on dry land. Joshua might be okay. He's no Moses. And maybe that's what God was trying to avoid, that unfair comparison. That's interesting. Good point. All right. Any other thought? All right. I thought this was interesting in chapter 5. So that now they're across. Now they're on the west side of the Jordan River, right? Now they are in the promised land. They just got a toehold in the promised land, but they're in the promised land at this point. And notice something that changes in chapter 5, verse 10. The children of Israel encamped in Gilgal and kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month at even in the plains of Jericho. And they did eat of the old corn of the land on the morrow after the Passover, unleavened cakes and parched corn in the selfsame day. And the manna ceased on the morrow after they had eaten of the old corn of the land. Neither had the children of Israel manna any more, but they did eat of the fruit of the land of Canaan that year. That's just sort of an interesting little note in the progression of these things. But the manna had lasted for over 40 years. They had participated in this blessing from God. They complained about it, but it was a significant blessing from God. But now it's done because they're in the promised land, and the land of Canaan is land that flows with milk and honey, as the 12 spies all agreed that was. So it was a very bountiful land, and they're participating in are able to enjoy the fruits of the land. Jericho. We know the story of Jericho. It's a famous story. It's really an important story. If you don't have, in chapter 6, if you don't have verse 2 highlighted, maybe you should do that. I think it's really significant. The Lord said unto Joshua, See, I have given into thy hand Jericho and the king thereof and the mighty men of valor. God said, I have given it to you. But you know what the story goes on to describe, right? They had to march around the city once each day for 6 times. And then on the 7th time, march around it 7 times on the 7th day. That would make a total of 13 encompassings of the walls of Jericho. At the end of the 7th circuit on the last day, sound the horns and shout, and every man go up, and the walls will fall down, and they did. But what I think is interesting, and a point we've tried to make before, and this is probably a valuable point, maybe when you're teaching someone, that God's gifts are often conditional. You know, everybody wants to think that gifts are free. You don't have to do anything to get a gift. That is not necessarily the case. That's not even the case in human affairs. You know, sometimes, you know, a store will have an offer of a free gift, but you have to apply for their credit card in order to get the free gift. It's a gift, but it's given with conditions, right? Well, many of God's promises are of that nature. And the very fact that conditions are attached to something does not make it any less a gift. So the city of Jericho, God said, I've given it to you. But they still had to meet the conditions of marching around it as prescribed by God. So the question could be asked, did they earn Jericho? Did they earn the city? I would say no, right? There's nothing about marching around the city. I can just see some old guy, you know, old crotchety guy. He's an Israelite. He's one of the big murmurers, you know. He's an expert murmurer, grumbler. I do not see how marching around this city could have any effect in defeating the city. I know a little bit about warfare, and that is not how you defeat a city. That won't do anything. That's a waste of time. I don't think we should even start on that. You could almost hear somebody complaining like that, couldn't you? This didn't have to make sense to them. This is what God said to do. It was the condition that he attached to the gift that he was giving them, the city of Jericho. And interestingly, at least in the text, there's not any record of them complaining or grumbling about that. They did it, and the result was true. The walls of the city fell. Sarah?
Put out the scarlet cord and gather all the people into the house. If she had done one and not the other, would she have been saved?
Exactly right. She had conditions to meet too. You know, there have been some archaeological digs at the site of the ancient city of Jericho. And they've been written up in some of the archaeological reviews. And some interesting things. Of course, so we're talking about something that happened probably close to 1,500 years before Jesus, about 3,500 years ago from now. So obviously you would think that there's not everything is perfectly preserved, but they have been able to detect that the city was taken suddenly. And that it was, you know, one of the ways that you took cities in that day and time was you besieged them. You cut them off. And when they run out of food, they have to surrender. And so if this was a typical way you would take a fortified walled city, you surround it, you'd cut it off. And that being the case, there wouldn't be any foodstuffs left in store inside the city. They would have used them all up before the city fell. In this case, they found storerooms of food that were not taken. They also said the city wasn't burned, and that was again something that you would typically do. The archaeology of the site tends to confirm, well, as much as it can, the Bible story of how the city of Jericho was taken. One of the orders about the city was, verse 18, chapter 6, verse 18. And ye in any wise keep yourself from the accursed thing, lest you make yourselves accursed when you take of the accursed thing, and make the camp of Israel a curse and trouble it. But all of the silver and gold and vessels of brass and iron are consecrated to the Lord. They shall come into the treasury of the Lord. So the people were specifically forbidden to take any spoil from the city. That's not typical, because typically that's what you do. As we've described often before, back in those days, these were city-state kind of arrangements geographically. And so there'd be a principal city, and then the geography around that city would belong to the king of Jericho. And so, but he's just the king of this immediate geographic area, not a vast empire or a country. And so what you do when you conquer one of these guys, you take what he's got, you take it from him, and you enrich yourself. You take his animals, you take his people, you enrich yourself with the spoils of the city. In this case, the spoils of the people were forbidden to take of the spoils of the city, with the exception that the metals, the valuable metals, were to be taken into the treasury of the Lord. But personally, they were not to enrich themselves with any of the spoil from the city of Jericho. It was called the accursed thing. Wade?
When they left Egypt, they kind of robbed their neighbors in Egypt. He told them to go around and ask their neighbors for silver and gold.
Yeah.
And so they took all that with them.
Yeah, but in this case, no. Yeah, exactly right. As Sarah noted a minute ago, look at verse 17. The city shall be accursed, even it and all that are therein, to the Lord. Only Rahab the harlot shall live, and she and all that are with her in the house, because she hid the messengers that we sent. So Rahab was spared, and the silver and gold and bronze and iron were spared. There's an interesting note. I think this is interesting too. In verse 26, chapter 6, verse 26. Joshua adjured them at that time, saying, Cursed be the man before the Lord that riseth up and buildeth this city of Jericho. He shall lay the foundation thereof in his firstborn, and in his youngest son shall he set up the gates of it. This is not one of those cases where it was said, this city will never be built again. There are some instances like that in the Old Testament where nobody's ever going to live here again. This city will never be built again. That's not what's said about Jericho. We know the city of Jericho existed in the time of Jesus. In New Testament times, we read about Jericho. So the city was ultimately rebuilt, but Joshua didn't say it won't be rebuilt. He said whoever does it is going to lay the foundation thereof in his firstborn, and his youngest son shall he set up the gates thereof. Look at 1 Kings 16. 1 Kings 16, verse 33. These are the days of Ahab in Israel, in the northern kingdom of Israel. Ahab, terrible king, right? His wife Jezebel, probably worse than he was. Ahab made a grove, and Ahab did more to provoke the Lord God of Israel to anger than all the kings of Israel that were before him. In his days, in Ahab's days, in his days did Hiel the Bethelite build Jericho. He laid the foundation thereof in Abiram, his firstborn, and set up the gates thereof in his youngest son Segub, according to the word of the Lord, which he spake by Joshua the son of Nun. That's interesting, isn't it? So Joshua is a true prophet, and he prophesied, whoever builds this city, this is what's going to happen to him, and it did. I think that's interesting. Any thoughts or comments this far? James?
Really quick, it's interesting that even when they're going into the land of promise, God gets the first fruits, the gold from Jericho. It's not the people's, because the people should put God first. Just like in their giving, everything that they do, God gets the first of everything he does in Jericho.
So that people could argue, hey, listen, we've come a long way here, and there's some really good stuff in this city, and we think we ought to be able to get it and have it. We deserve it. God deserves the first fruit. Good point. Good point. All right. Okay. So when we get to chapter 7, in chapter 7, the next town on the map is a nearby little town called Ai. Look in chapter 7 at verse 2. Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is beside Beth Aven, on the east side of Bethel, and spake unto them, saying, Go up and view the country. And the men went up and viewed Ai. And they returned to Joshua and said to him, Let not all the people go up, but let about 2,000 or 3,000 men go up and smite Ai, and make not all the people to labor thither, for they are but a few. So they went up thither, there went up thither of the people about 3,000 men, and they fled before the men of Ai. And the men of Ai smote them, about 36 men, for they chased them from before the gate even to Shebarim, and smote them in the going down, wherefore the hearts of the people melted and became as water. Whoa. We were told this was going to be easy. In fact, that's not even a big city. We should be able to take them, with one hand tied behind our back. And we didn't. And they chased us out, and they killed a bunch of our men, and they're very discouraged. Verse 7, Joshua said, Alas, O Lord God, wherefore hast thou at all brought this people over Jordan to deliver us into the hand of the Amorites, to destroy us? Would to God we had been content and dwelt on the other side of Jordan. O Lord, what shall I say when Israel turneth their backs before their enemies? For the Canaanites and all the inhabitants of the land shall hear of it, and shall environ us round, and cut off our name from the earth. And what wilt thou do unto thy great name? And the Lord said unto Joshua, Get thee up, wherefore liest thou thus upon thy face? Israel has sinned, and they have also transgressed my covenant which I commanded them. For they have even taken of the accursed thing, and have also stolen and dissembled also, and they have put it even among their own stuff. And so, a little bit of a rebuke of Joshua there. Joshua, said, man, we should have just stayed over on the other side of Jordan. We were okay over there. We come over here and we won one battle, and in the very next one we get whipped, and maybe, I don't know. And by the way, all the other peoples of the land are going to hear about this, and they're going to be emboldened to overtake us and wipe us out. And God says, Joshua, get up. The problem is there's sin in the camp of Israel. They've taken of the accursed thing and they've put it in with their own stuff. You're going to have to straighten this out. The reason why they got beat is because they took of the accursed things of Jericho. Wait.
So, right there in verse 2 where it says, Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is beside Beth-Haven on the east side of Bethel. So Bethel, that's where Abraham built the altar, and I think that's where Jacob saw the ladder dream, right? In
I
Bethel.
think that's right. We just read that on our daily Bible reading. I believe that's right.
And so they're all the way back around where Abraham and Jacob lived.
It's kind of better full circle. Yeah, interesting point. Josh.
Yeah, I mean, verse 1 talks about Achan and his sin. It was the problem was just one man. It wasn't like a big conspiracy, like a mass group of them that seemed to be getting together and all rebelled against God. But you had this one person, after they were told not to take it, the gold and silver and all the things. This one person, probably, I don't know what he was thinking, but I could probably get away with it. And then everybody else was sort of ignorant of that, and it caused that much trouble in the camp of Israel.
That's a good point. So we actually know who the problem child is, right? As Josh pointed out there in verse 1, the children of Israel committed a trespass and the accursed thing. For Achan, the son of Carmi, the son of Zabdi, the son of Zerah, the tribe of Judah, took of the accursed thing, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against the children of Israel. So we know already who the culprit is. But Joshua doesn't know. Joshua doesn't even have a clue about this. But the Lord explains to him there's a problem because they've taken of the accursed thing. So we won't read all of this, but what they did to find out who was guilty is that they called the people together. First of all, they called the tribes together, and Achan was of the tribe of Judah. So the tribe of Judah was whoever the guy, the guilty guy, is in Judah. Then the families were called, and the family was selected. The household of the families was selected. And then ultimately the man Achan was pointed out. Look in chapter 7, verse 21, as Achan explained what he did. Verse 20, Joshua 7, verse 20, Achan answered Joshua and said, Indeed, I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and thus have I done. When I saw among the spoils a goodly Babylonish garment, and 200 shekels of silver, and a wedge of gold, and 50 shekels weight, then I coveted them, and took them, and behold, they are hid in the earth in the midst of my tent, and the silver under it. So Joshua sent messengers, and they ran into the tent, and behold, it was hid in his tent, and the silver under it. And they took them out of the midst of the tent, and brought them unto Joshua and all the children of Israel, and laid them out before the Lord. And Joshua and all Israel with him took Achan the son of Zerah, and the silver, and the garment, and the wedge of gold, and his sons and his daughters, and his oxen and his sheep, oxen and asses, and his sheep, and his tent, and all that he had, and they brought them into the valley of Achor. And Joshua said, Why hast thou troubled us? The Lord shall trouble thee this day. And all Israel stoned him with stones, and burned them with fire after they had stoned them with stones. And they raised over him a great heap of stones unto this day. So the Lord turned from the fierceness of his anger, wherefore the name of that place was called the Valley of Achor unto this day. Again, this is a pretty familiar story to us, but there's some powerful lessons right there. And I think Josh hit upon a key point. This was just one guy. As we've said several times, the children of Israel numbered well over 1 million people, maybe 2 million or more. This is one guy. And one guy just took, you could put everything that he took, you could put in a average size wheelbarrow. This wasn't like, he took, a whole convoy of materials and carted them off, It wasn't like he loaded up a bunch of carts and transported, tons of goods out of it. He took a few little things. It wasn't that much in relative terms. And yet it was exactly what God said not to do. And that's why they got beat at Ai. And the answer was, you got to get this out. You got to get this evil out of the people of Israel. To the point that we've emphasized over and over again, God cares about little things. This is a pretty little thing. This is not, as I said, this is not like he took a whole boatload of stuff out of Jericho. He took just a little, and yet it was enough to cause all kind of grief for the people of Israel. And it says he troubled Israel. Why hast thou troubled us? The Lord shall trouble thee. I think an application that we could make, a present day application is, here I am, I'm a member of this local congregation. I'm just one person. And I did something I shouldn't have done. But it wasn't real bad. It was just a little something that I shouldn't have done. Some people knew about it and found out about it, but it wasn't that bad. It wasn't that big of a deal. But you know what I've done? I've troubled the church. I've troubled this congregation of God's people by virtue of the fact that what I did brought reproach and shame upon all the rest. And so, I think a principle here of what Achan did was, he troubled Israel. We trouble God's people when we disobey the will of God, and we need to see it that way. The other thing that's significant, I think, here is how they destroyed him. They destroyed Achan and his family. Every possession that he had was stoned and burned, and a heap of stones piled up over it. What about, again, the vengeance of the Lord. Vengeance is mine. I will repay, saith the Lord. The Lord is a God he's a God of love and grace and mercy, but he's also a God of justice. And we see that over and over repeated. Josh?
Yeah, it just reminded me of what Moses said in Numbers 32, be sure your sin will find
Be
you
sure
out.
your sin
And
will
this is exactly that scenario. He
Exactly.
got away with it and his sin found him out.
Exactly right. Other thoughts here, anybody? Wayne?
Yeah, there's a New Testament example of something very similar to this in 1 Corinthians 5. The man had his own father's wife. It was something more dramatic, more visible than what was done here. But the same scenario. There was sin within the church there, and they hadn't removed it.
And it was influencing the whole group.
Yeah, and it affected the whole group, and it's like a little leaven. Leaven's the whole lump, and that's what was the issue here, verse 11, it says, Israel has sinned, and they have transgressed my covenant which I commanded.
Yeah.
So the whole nation was defiled because of what Achan had done.
Good point, good point. John?
We hear the term tossed around a lot nowadays, the entitlement mentality. I think this is a good example of that. He kind of took it on his own to decide, this is not a big deal, I'll just take this, and felt entitled to do that. We have to be really careful of that mentality, just the thinking that way.
Yeah, the mentality is this doesn't really matter. You don't get to say what matters. God gets to say what matters. Clayton?
So we talk about he was punished for disobeying as he took the stuff. As we just read earlier, though, in 6, the gold and silver was specifically for God to go in the treasury. So not only did he disobey, he stole what God had set aside for himself.
Oh, good point. Good point. I hadn't even thought about that, but I think you're right. So he took what he should have taken, and in the taking of it, he took something that should have gone to the Lord's people's treasury. Good point. Good point.
Interesting that his name, Achan, actually means trouble.
Oh, okay. So I think some Bible names came to mean something after the fact, and that's probably a meaning that was attached to his name after the fact, don't you think? I know some people who are trouble. Yeah, good point, good point. Tom?
It appears that he repented, because he said, I said
He confessed.
confessed and repented, but the consequences are still there, not only to him, but his family and all his possessions as well.
Good point.
It was an example made to the people, that God meant his word, and, you just can't ignore it and let it go.
Okay, good point. All right, we don't have time. We're out of time. They go back to Ai then. After they take care of Achan, they go back to Ai. We'll pick up our study there next week, Lord willing. Thanks, everybody.